a lot of the people who are drawn to magic, who are drawn to witchcraft, who are drawn to any kind of esoteric technology, are drawn there because they have a lot of healing to do, a lot of personal healing to do. And if you are trying to create something on a magical level that there is something in your subconscious that is blocking that from coming into your reality, then you can't just try harder or do more ritual or give more offerings.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu Taoist Master San Qing, and I have an incredible guest here today. It's Christmas morning. Once again, I come down to the tree and the universe has brought me this incredible being. I'm so grateful to have on the podcast today Diotima Mantineia, a witch and a practicing astrologist, and has spent many, many years mastering these very crafts. So I want to welcome you to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it really is very exciting to delve deep into a greater understanding of the very idea that sort of conceptual for majority of people, but magic in of itself, what that really means and where it comes from, and having the sort of mastery and the depth of understanding and the amount of time you've put into your craft over your lifetime. I'm really excited to share it with the world and go deeper on it. I would love you to start with a little bit about yourself. Just share with the audience how you got here to this very moment.
Well, I grew up in Manhattan, and one day back in 1969, I was wandering down the street and I looked up in this brownstone and finally decided to go into this bookstore that I had seen before but never gone into. And it was a bookstore that was owned by an astrologer, and it was in one of those old brownstones that are so common in New York. And it was amazing. You know, everything was wood except the front window. And there were bookshelves floor to ceiling with a library ladder going around three sides of this store, all astrology books. And at the time, I knew nothing about astrology. I was 17, 18, somewhere along there. And and I met the owner. His name was Zoltan Mason, and he was an Eastern European gentleman and very good astrologer, and he taught classes in astrology. So I spent many happy hours hanging off the library ladder, looking at all of the books, and started taking classes from him. And studied with him, I guess, for a couple of years, and then life took me to college and to a Bachelor of Science degree and a couple of years in grad school studying agronomy, which is the study of crops and soils. And that was when I learned that you can't be an astrologer and a scientist too. So I put my books away, but fortunately I didn't throw them, my astrology books, but fortunately I didn't throw them out. And about 5 years later, things were a little weird for me, and I remembered how much help astrology had been to me. So I pulled out my books, and that was when I got back into astrology. And then a few years after that, I met some of the people who belonged to the first coven that I joined, which was back in the mid 80s. And a few years after that, I opened a little metaphysical bookstore, which was pretty interesting and amazing. And since then, I've just been going on being a professional astrologer and a witch. And eventually, back about almost a quarter century ago now, I moved from Maryland, which was where I went to college, down to Western North Carolina, and finally got the life that I'd always dreamed of, which was living in the country and being able to work from home and having a garden, big garden. And I've been doing that now for quite some time.
Wow. Wow. So I think we should start with like giving the audience a definition of what a witch is, right? Like, what is the real? There's this undertone, right? When I talk about magic, people get confused about what the alteration of it is. I'm not confused. It's magic, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very tangible and very real. But there's this skewed sort of social experiment that goes on through history where people get commandeered by their mind being melded with these weird ideas of what reality is. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I speak of with you when it comes to magic is very tangible, very real for both of us. Yet there are many people that just think it's just this Hollywood wizardry that's sort of like unobtainable and it's just all made up in our minds. So if you could share with the audience a little bit more about that definition and how you see it, what it means to you, so people can get an understanding, because it's really important for people to level up. That's what
I
this
agree.
conversation is about.
Yeah. Yes. Well, as you know, there are many different styles of magic, and as far as witchcraft is concerned, there are also many different styles of witchcraft. And if you ask 5 or 10 witches for a definition of witchcraft, you'll get about 20 definitions. But as far as I'm concerned, a witch is someone who interacts with the earth and with reality in a magical way. And by magic, I mean, we believe that we can alter physical reality through the use of our minds, our emotions, and certain herbs and stones and other materia, which are helpful but not absolutely required to do our work. And what I think differentiates the witch from, say, the ceremonial magician or the ritualist is the fact that we are very, very tied into the natural world and the changing seasons, and we work very closely with spirits. I mean, we believe, as many magicians do, and I'm not saying witches are the only ones who do this, um, we work very closely with beings who are not physical, but interact with the physical world. Not physical in the way that we are physical, but they interact with the physical world. So there is a level of connection not only with spirits, but specifically with spirits of the land and spirits of nature that most witches have. But again, it's magic is fluid, and magicians are. I mean, I've studied gazillion different types and styles of magic. From I worked for a couple of years with an African elder of the Dagara tribe by the name of Malidoma Somé, and so I learned that style of magic. And then I've studied different styles of shamanism, which is essentially the same thing in the sense that shamans are spirit walkers. They work with spirits. I've studied ceremonial and ritual magic, but witchcraft is what I am most comfortable with, and witchcraft is where I have sort of made my home, my magical home.
Yeah, I mean, it is. There's this main vein within. I feel like Taoism has some parallels to what you speak of, and I think generally speaking, across
Yes.
the
Mm-hmm.
board, there's a fortified grounding and foundational understanding that integrates the relationship between the earth and the universe, and how you connect
Mm-hmm.
things together. And you're sort of like the conduit that sort of makes it realized with the spirit world that there's an altering effect in this 3D reality. And
Yeah, one of my some of the training that was very important to me. I started training in Chinese martial arts back in the early '90s, and it was, I guess, about 15 or it was after I moved down here that I met a teacher who was not just practicing martial arts, but was very into Taoist spirituality. And so I learned how to work with energy in a much more refined way studying with him. So that was, and we found in our discussions, I don't think he really knew what I meant when I said I was a witch when we first met. But then, you know, as we started discussing it, and we became friends and talked about it a lot. And it was, you know, we discovered that actually we were coming pretty much from the same point of view. There was some small differences, but basically we both agreed that consciousness, energy, what I call consciousness with a capital C, he called the Tao. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, that works for me too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's this interesting phenomenon now. You know, just through your own admission and your deep understanding, working with all these different traditions and having such an profound, broader view of the landscape of magic from different traditions, and then you know. Back in the day, we're talking about this. Like back in the day, you're able to acquire these things that my kids wouldn't know what they are. They're called books, and you're able to acquire this library of incredible knowledge and information from incredible authors and people that are writing and transcribing and documenting this magic processes that you can't find today. So there's kind of like this interesting sort of like new age. I feel like it's almost like delusion, and so they look at the stuff that you and I speak of, that we teach and practice in on a daily basis. So I live and breathe it, and there's this sort of like, oh yeah, you know, I got this feeling, you know, I'm channeling the Palladians, energy's coming in, you know, but there's no foundation to it. And then they sort of go on for a year or two, a little misdirection, lost. I'm a goth. I'm a vampire. I'm a this or that, whatever it is. And nothing comes out of it and said, oh yeah, I remember that time when I was a little delusional. Well, no, this is not what we're speaking of.
No.
We're talking about fundamental altering of dimensional shifts here. And it's being translated into this 3D reality, and it will come in all forms: manifestation, magic, physical healing, transformational creativity that you've never seen before. And it's very tangible.
It is.
It realizes. And so,
and as you said, you have to live it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not just something where you go, oh, it's Saturday night, I think I'll do a ritual. You know, it's like you wake up in the morning and making your coffee is a magical act, you know.
Right.
Because you live with magic and you go out and you greet the spirits, and you know, the spirits of the land, and magic becomes part of who you are, not something you do.
Yeah. I would agree 1,000,000%. This is an interesting point you bring up, because within Taoism, there's an interesting line that gets sort of crossed over, and you know there's a misdirection and a deluded material over history, and this happens. One of the most powerful access points to information, apart from what's been, you know, transcribed and documented through history, through certain lineages. I have several, but there's a point of the highest point of consciousness for a Taoist is direct source channeling. There's nothing more powerful than that, right? So, and people go, well, you know, Jiafu, you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You say, you know, the written word is useless, and you know, you got a channel and all this kind of. It's like, listen, what people need to understand is it's what resonates with you. Okay, so. When you have possession of this scripture, this ancient text, a spell, a ritual, when it resonates with you, you will feel it as a visceral connective moment within this that makes it real to you. And then you can start to translate that. And I think a lot of people, you know, they get caught in this title, esoteric sort of like a deep dive of just watered down stuff that doesn't mean anything, and then they get into their head, and they're like,
Mhm.
I'm an intellect that needs to read all the documents that are telling me what real witchcraft is, or what real spell casting is, or what real Taoist magic is. And the fact is you can read that stuff all day long, but if you don't have the juice, and I think this brings us back to the energy and
Mhm.
connection, as you referred to, and I think this is where I'm going with the spirit aspect, right? So the spirit
Mhm.
aspect within Taoism, there's a certain group of practitioners. As Taoist priests, you get all this ritual cultivation, internal alchemy stuff. But one of the aspects is what they call deity magic. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not a real fan of that, and I've never really subscribed to it. It's a relationship, and this is why I'm bringing the audience's attention to what you had mentioned just a few moments before. This is a relationship that you have with the spirit world. I am not sitting here commanding them to do anything. Be
Right.
very clear on this. And I think
Exactly.
there's a lot of delusion. That's where you get delusional,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You think that you're going to command this entity. You're going to tell them what to do, how to do it, and for what reason. And that's where I think things get watered down. There's a misdirection, and it's deliberate through history, where someone has said, hey, I can't have people create this relationship with this high ascension, this high awareness, the spirit realm. So I'm going to deconstruct it and mess it all up, and then throw it out into the annals of history, and someone's going to get disheartened and delusioned by the fact that this stuff is not working out the way it is. What do you think?
Exactly. I think that, yes, it absolutely is about relationships, and it's also very much about experiential understanding of a level of reality that is beyond the physical. And unless you actually can have that experiential reality, which you can only do by working with your mind, working with your emotions, working with the energy. That's why, for instance, Tai Chi and Qigong and other energetic internal alchemy is so useful, is because it brings you into your body and it helps you locate it helps you take your thoughts about something from your mind into your body. And if you can source yourself in your body, the spirits are better able to communicate with you. Now, I am not, someone who, I mean, I there are a couple of deities that I work with, land spirits, various other spirits. I do offerings because I really feel that actual physical offerings build a bridge. It's not like, well, this spirit demands that I give them, 4 eggs with honey and all of this sort of thing. Otherwise, they're going to get pissed off at me. No, that's not the way it works. But we are in physical reality, and we have to admit that. And one of the reasons that we want to work with spirits is because they have a larger understanding of of reality than we do. We're here in physical reality, in time and space reality, which is bounded in a way. And so many people, particularly like um, some of the Christian religions are like, well, we're here because we're being tested or we're being punished, and if we don't do it right, we're going to spend eternity in hell. And that always just made me like shake my fist at the heavens as a child. But really, what I think we're here to do is learn how to create within certain boundaries. Every creation has a boundary here in physical reality. If you build a building, there's a footprint on the land that the building fits in. A painting has to fit within the canvas. The sculpture has to come from the marble. So when we create within physical reality, we're doing it not fully understanding the extent of the reality from which we came and from which we draw. And so I think it's important for us to not get so into our heads about, oh, I want to ascend, and we're all going to ascend and play harps in heaven, or hang out with the masters, or whatever. No, I really believe that we're here for a reason, and that reason is a creative one. It's not a test, it's not a punishment, but we have to open ourselves up to physical reality, to um, to accept the fact that we are physical and make the most of it. Does that resonate with you?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, the offerings part is such a big part of any ritual, in my opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
you are in tune with what it is that you're interacting with, and you're creating this relationship that we speak of. When you present this offering, you will feel a rippling resonance in the space you're in.
Exactly.
You'll put that down and go, ho, ho, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
that candle, and you go, whoa, it just went up another notch. You'll light the incense and it went up another notch. And there is a crafted ritual that goes with this. And I'm not going to use a realm of man word, but I guess I will. There's an honoring, there's a value. I'm going to use the word value for this very relationship. And it is evident by these moments and this resonance that is presented, and the charge that you and I just experienced right now, through
Mm-hmm.
that understanding, through that knowing that that's what you're doing. You're giving and you're receiving, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
continuous cycle. It's your gift is your offering is your gift. And when
Mm-hmm.
you really embody that, profound things take place. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I also think the offering is, yes, it is a gift, but it's also a bridge, because it's not always easy to bridge between the physical realm and the world of spirit, particularly for the humans. And also, I think that there needs to be an invitation to spirit. I mean, some of them can come in and try and take over, but I think generally, if you want to work with the spirit, there has to be an invitation. There has to be a bridge built between the world of the physical and the spiritual realm. And I think that offerings help form a bridge to the spirit realm. I'm not, I'm not a channeler or anything like that. When I connect and commune with spirits, it's not like I have, listened to it like I would listen to a podcast, but the ideas come into my head. The presence is something that I feel, and then too, when I'm out and about in the world, and all of a sudden I get this, watch out for that, or no, go this way. I understand that I'm being guided because I have invited that guidance into my life. And I really do think that any spirits we want to work with are going to wait to be invited to work with us for the most part. I mean, I think that there are certain spirits that maybe we connected with before we jumped off the cloud into this lifetime that kind of look out for us. But I think for the most part, if you want to actively work with specific spirits, they need to be invited, and the offerings are part of the invitation.
Mm, yeah. Amen to that, my friend. You know, I've had a pretty close relationship with one of my teachers, Latsu. I channeled him about 30 years ago. And I've had a direct contact with him on a minute-to-minute basis. He's here occupying the space right now, and it's his voice and his presence, his appearance is as vivid as I see you, and I really believe that that relationship has been infinite, endless, constant, limitless,
Mm-hmm.
because of the value that I have for that relationship,
Yeah.
and because I am so grateful. And it's not a groveling grateful. It's just that every moment is like the first time I ever experienced being in his presence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That I believe that has a definitely a fundamental, effect on your relationship with the spirit world.
I
What do you
agree.
think?
Yeah, I agree. Um, that sense of presence, that sense of reality, that and the connection, that's really the important thing as far as that work is concerned, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and you'll start to realize it, and if
Hmm.
you're operating in communicating with certain spirits, the more that you start to value the relationship, the more they will value you and what is being brought to the experience. It's just not a one way
Hmm.
street for anyone.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
a giving and taking. There's a gift and offering, and then there's this understanding that by attuning yourself and you listen closely, you can really craft some incredible magic, like stuff that blows
Absolutely.
people's minds, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think that is limited, honestly, to the individual's ability to create, and then listen to what is necessary. What are the tools that you need to actually materialize this within this relationship, whether it may be a material object or it may be a resonance that you need to attune to. However, the spirit is guiding you on what it is that you need to craft it with. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I agree. The ability to kind of, and it's, I think all magicians who have done magic for any length of time understand this, that there is a certain, as you said, resonance that you need to start resonating with, when you're trying to create something on a magical level. And the spirits can help you, the relationship with the spirits can help you. But I also think that it's important, and I think many people overlook this. We have to deal with our own subconscious. We have to deal with our own stuff. And this is in so many ways a toxic civilization, a toxic society that is overloaded with trauma because it is fully focused on the material realm, and we have lost really lost our understanding of our connection with spirit. um, and I think that there is a lot of trauma just in our society, in addition to the trauma that a lot of the individual trauma that a lot of people experience. And from my experience, a lot of the people who are drawn to magic, who are drawn to witchcraft, who are drawn to any kind of esoteric technology, are drawn there because they have a lot of healing to do, a lot of personal healing to do. And if you are trying to create something on a magical level, that there is something in your subconscious that is blocking that from coming into your reality, then you can't just try harder or do more ritual or give more offerings, because I've found that for the most part, magic always works in the sense that if you do magic for something and you are connected and you are working with spirits and you know what you're doing and you do magic and it doesn't happen, or maybe something happens that's even against that, then you have to start looking at what that is, and the magic will bring you some kind of understanding of what you need to change in your life to make that happen. And too many people don't listen to the whispers from the universe. When
Mm.
they do magic, it doesn't happen, but this book falls, at their feet when they're in the bookstore, or they go to their therapist and their therapist says something, but they just ignore it. Or, the if you do magic to change something within your world, and that the change that you want doesn't happen, there will be things that come up in your life that will help you understand what needs to change within you. And that can be damn difficult. I mean, I'm old, you know, and I've been sort of looking within for well over 50 years now, and I still am peeling away layers of the onion of all of the stuff that I had to unlearn on top of the stuff that I learned, and the things that the mental discipline that was required to keep my thoughts on the right track. But also, you can't just, you know, clutch your crystals and keep repeating your mantra and the red Mercedes is going to show up in your driveway the next morning, you know, that sort of thing. That's not how it works. You can't force that. You have to start looking deep within and going, all right, what is the emotion associated with these thoughts? And where does that emotion come from? And is it something that, you know, maybe it's this feeling of, I don't deserve this. And if you look a little deeper, you find that there are all sorts of reasons perhaps that you don't deserve it. Maybe your parents taught you, maybe you know, lots of times it's traced back to, you can trace it back to your childhood, but also I'm a firm believer in reincarnation. It can be traced back to previous lives and previous existences where perhaps you are in this lifetime. And this is where astrology comes in handy, because you can see what, you know, what the big issues are in this lifetime. And so perhaps in this lifetime, you came in to work out some things that you needed to work out from a previous lifetime, to learn specific lessons, to perhaps even to learn to heal yourself so that you can help others to heal as well. So I think that there's a lot more to magic than people think. And, you know, I was never really crazy about the Harry Potter books because they just, you know, there was no indication of the depth of magic that I understand magic to be, which is bigger than the entire, you know, as big as the universe and then some. And they're just waving wands around, you know.
Well, yeah, no, I completely agree. You have to be a barometer and a tuning fork for this to be realized.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it starts with the humanists, and then you realize that there's obstruction. This mental emotional state is affecting the fluidity, the resonance of what it is that you want to create.
Mm-hmm.
With that, when you identify this human expression and you realize that these are the very construct of limitation from an unconscious perspective,
Right.
then you can start to, you know, heal from these things. And you know, within Taoism, that's like one of the first things that I teach people is, and this might sound a little, you know, a little intense, but your emotions don't control you. You control your emotions.
Agreed.
Like, whoa, hang on, that's kind of
Mhm.
intense. I'm like, yeah. And here's another one. Your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And people will go, whoa, hang on a second. What do you mean by that? I'm like, well, I'm basically giving people the opportunity to perhaps contemplate an idea that can be realized, that, you know, once you believe in something and it is absolutely fundamentally validated by you from emerging the two conscious and unconscious processes, you can then realize things in this 3D reality, and they will have a resonance. They will have the very fundamentals of the energy. The energy has a vibration. The vibration has a frequency. The frequency has a resonance. If you can resonate at whatever that is, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. And two, I also think that there's a certain amount of necessary humility involved in this question of magical creation, because I do believe that we are part of each one of us has what some people call a higher self or an oversoul, but we are part of a larger being who is experiencing life in this body, and probably in lots of other bodies too, within time and space. And that there were probably decisions made before we came, we came out of our mother's womb, about the life that we are going to be living, and the people we're going to meet, the experiences we're going to have. I don't believe life is deterministic in that way. I think we have a hell of a lot of free will, but I also think our free will began with certain levels of agreement from us before we came into this body. And so there are going to be certain things that, try as you might, you're not going to avoid them because you kind of agreed to them before you jumped off the cloud, And sometimes you just have to figure, well, yeah, maybe this road is leading me down a path that I don't recognize as important right now, but I will. I mean, I think everyone has had, excuse me, that kind of experience where something happened and it seemed like a really horrible thing or difficult thing. And yet when you look back on it, you go, wow, if that hadn't happened, my life would be so different, and not in a good way. So I think that at some point when we're working as magicians and we're trying to create the life that we want, we have to understand that there is an intelligence, a wisdom, a being that is guiding our life, of whom we are a part. Some people call it guardian angel, whatever, but there is a bigger plan, and it's like an itinerary. Well, you're going to hit London, Paris, and Rome. Okay. Those, you want to do those three things, but you got plenty of time. So, maybe you'll run off to Norway for a little while, and then maybe you'll go here. Maybe you'll spend a little more time in Paris than you planned. So you have an itinerary and certain things in your life that are going to hit probably at certain times, but that gives you still plenty of room to create. But when it comes to some of the big things that were planned out in advance, you just kind of need to say, okay, I'm trusting in my guidance here, and I'm just going to move ahead, and understand that you can't control everything. And I think that is something that probably most, if not, well, I'll say most magicians and astrologers, for that matter, got into magic and astrology because they wanted more control over their lives. Because control is a big thing. And I remember as a teenager dealing with a hell of a lot of anxiety because I'm thinking through the world and the reality and all of this sort of thing, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm thinking, I can't possibly control this. I mean, I'm at the mercy of this huge universe, right? What am I going to do? How am I going to save myself? And then you realize that you are not at the mercy. You are connected to a larger reality that you are part of, and a precious part of, and you're not being kicked around like a football in physical reality unless you cut yourself off entirely from any kind of spirituality. So I think that's an important thing to realize too, is at some point you've got to let go of this, I need to control everything, and understand that you're never going to be able to, so get used to it.
I think you're making some very valid points, and I think that when you engage that into the recipe, it can be problematic for many practitioners when they have to control. Because I mean, I've created magic that's myopic right down to the last dot, down to the last second, and it materializes. But there's an understanding and a relationship there that doesn't put me in a place where I feel as though I have to control things. Yet it's sort of part of the fundamentals of Taoism, where it's kind of like Wu Wei, effortless action. And so when you access what we call the center point between the breath in and the breath out, the Wu Ji, which is the mother, the Tao, the mother of all things, when you access that, all of a sudden, nothing turns into everything, all things, and all things turn into nothing, and it happens. So I truly believe and agree with you in that understanding. And I would say furthermore, let's get into the astrology and how powerful that is, and using that as a tool. There's so many different ways to really get an understanding of your relationship with the universe. As a Taoist, that's something that's fundamental for us. In the constellations and star-stepping magic is a huge cornerstone to our magical practices, is the constellations and the universe and the stars and the planets. And, I mean, that's fundamental. Between the earth and the universe, these are the things. We're the conduit. Let's go into that and how you practice that and how you integrate that within your magic and how that bears fruit through your experience.
Well, I think that as astrologers, and I will say that there are many who won't necessarily agree with me, but I think what we're doing is we are reading patterns in the universe. And when there are lots of different patterns in the universe. There are, I mean, just in the physical universe, we see patterns all the time. And I think this is one of the reasons why there are so many different ways of practicing astrology. There's tropical astrology and sidereal astrology and Vedic astrology and Chinese astrology and all of this, but they're all ways of reading patterns in the world. And I think people run into trouble when they just sort of randomly try and mix those things. I think you have to have, I mean, I know astrologers who have deeply studied Vedic astrology and deeply studied tropical Western astrology. And a friend of mine has deeply studied tropical Western and is now deeply studying Chinese astrology. You do that and you want to blend them together, those patterns, that's fine. But I have stuck with tropical Western astrology, and I believe that what I'm doing is I'm reading patterns in the universe. I do not believe that astrology, I believe that astrology indicates, it's like a weather report. It gives you a lot of information about the energies that are coming into your life and what you're dealing with, but I do not believe it is determinative.
Yes, amen.
And I also do not believe that the planets, I mean, so many materialists who object, foaming at the mouth, to astrology, seem to think that astrologers believe, and I'm sure some of them do, I am definitely not one of them, that the planets are kind of giving off death rays, that, and these rays that are coming down from the planets are manipulating you like you're some kind of puppet. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's more like, these energies that are part of the patterns of the universe, that the planets help us see those patterns very clearly. And so I think that astrology can be extremely helpful. There are a lot of magicians I know who don't use astrology, and I don't think that there's any need to. Most witches, whether they believe it or not, use astrology simply because most of them work with the moon in some way or another. But I think that astrology can, if you are trained in astrology, or if you are, willing to talk to an astrologer, if you want to learn, if you want to do some kind of specific magic, then I think working magic under specific astrological conditions can be very helpful. And there are astrologer magicians I know who do an extraordinary job of it, who one in particular I'm thinking of, who creates magical materia, things like sprays and oils and bath salts, but she does them in full ritual, within full ritual that is and done under specific astrological conditions. She creates these things, and damn, they are powerful. I mean, there's just no question in my mind that what she does is very, very powerful. But you don't have to do that to make magic. It's just one of the tools that we have at our disposal as magicians if we choose to use it. Astrology, though, is also helpful for people who are not magicians but would like to understand more about perhaps some of the primary issues that have come up in their lives, that they're learning about, that they're trying to work with. I mean, there are signatures in charts, for instance, that just scream childhood trauma. And when I'm talking to people, generally my clients tend to be at least past their second Saturn return. In other words, over 30. And this, I mean, their first Saturn return, so over 30. And sometimes even past their second Saturn return. The Saturn return is when the planet Saturn, where it's at in the sky right now, comes around to the same point where it was when you were born. And that happens about every 29 and a half years. And it is a maturing process. And you can see it even in people who don't believe in astrology. And so when I'm dealing with these people, when I'm talking to them about their charts, usually they are aware enough of their own situation that I can sort of ease into discussing perhaps issues around trauma and have they worked with it. And if they haven't, I can refer them to, people who can help them with that. But there are also gifts that people have. I mean, there are so many times I get people coming to me not because they are dealing with issues from their childhood that are kind of ruining their lives right now, although that happens fairly frequently, but because they don't know where they're going. They don't know what they, quote, should be doing. And one of the first things I say to them is, what do you want to do? And they're like, if I knew that, I wouldn't be asking you, And I say, well, then it's important for you to start paying attention to your own thoughts, start paying attention to your own feelings, start paying attention to what makes you happy, to what brings you joy, what brings soul level fulfillment to you. And I can look at the chart and I can say things like, well, it seems to me that you have a very analytical mind and that you like building things. And have you ever considered, engineering? And they may go, oh, particularly women, because, women are much less likely to even consider the fact that something like engineering could be a career for them. Or I'll see, for instance, that that the planets Mercury and Jupiter are well placed and connected to each other. And I'll say, have you ever considered becoming a writer? Like, oh yeah, I I write a lot, but I've never published it. And so I can say, well, it looks to me like there's a time coming up in, whenever, this year, next year, whatever, when you might have a good chance of getting published. And so maybe you could try that, because a lot of times people go through their lives and you can see these astrological planetary patterns happening in their lives. They just go by and nothing happens. But that's because they don't know that there's all that energy right there, right now, that they could use to make something happen. But if they don't engage with their own lives, then there's not much you can do. So I think astrology can help you time things, can help you understand when the time is right for certain things to happen, when you aren't going to be forcing it. For instance, if you go out in the northern hemisphere and you plant corn in December, that seed is going to rot before it germinates, before the warm weather comes around. Planting corn in December just isn't going to work. So, astrology helps you figure out when is a good time to plant certain seeds, and also can help you figure out maybe what's holding you back from fulfilling your potential, because I think that's what astrology can help us find is our own potential.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree. I anyone that sort of presents an absolute truth is a little problematic.
Yeah.
And the variables are there, and I think you and I have a deeper understanding of that within the magical realm of cultivation and creativity. There is this. There, you may move something here, you're going to move it over there. There's a fluid
Mm-hmm.
takes place.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be present for that to be realized, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
you're dead on when you said, it's like being aware, noticing things, because within that, the astrology, numerology, another one, everyone,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. And I'm like, I'm terribly sorry, but I don't agree with you when it comes to that's it. There's
Right.
variables. It's like, well, you're a life path. You're a 33 33 11 88 88 99 999. Hey, cool, that's great. And I mean, I had this numerologist on, and he had he would read the 52 cards of a deck. He's like, they're always right, 100%. I'm like, okay, and I think this is amazing. And you're this, this, and this. And I said, listen, I agree with probably 50% of what you're saying. The other 50%, I can show you that that's not even evident in my very expression of what I'm doing right now in this reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I showed him the energetic charge of that, and he was a little perplexed. But then he said, oh, well, there's the other variable where you could be this. I'm like, as long as you're open to understanding there's a variable in all things, that there's a billion ways up the mountain, that I think we're all going to get along and sing Kumbaya. But when someone wants to solidify it by saying this is an absolute, it's problematic in my opinion. So, I think it's fantastic because, I teach people body dowsing. One of the ancient Taoist techniques is to be a body dowser. That means identify instant vortices, power centers, ley lines, all that stuff can be materialized. And, if we want to water it down to, well, how does that even work? Well, if you're a psychiatrist, a hypnotherapist, someone who might be a little bit more in that mindset, a construct that they have to identify what it is, it's called an ideomotor response. If someone hasn't heard of that, it's a divination transmission to the world that we live in, where you're getting this transmission, it's transmuting through your physical body, and you're relating it to tarot cards, pendulums, dowsing forks, dowsing tuning, just your body's clear sense. I mean, it comes in all different forms, but generally that's where people can kind of get an understanding, because they're like, I'm holding this pendulum, it's going insane, but I'm not moving my arm because this is going on all day long. It brings me right back to what you said. Pay attention. Attention. This is happening all the time. And then they get captured that moment where they're holding the pendulum and they're like, I'm not doing anything, and this thing is going insane. It's like, because you're getting information. Now, I would propose an opportunity to suggest, using a method, and that's why I think it's really important, using witchcraft, using, Taoist magic, however you want to define it. Have a method that you can craft and refine and actually have it bear fruit, actually have it materialize something that can be validated by you. And that's where you sort of get your sort of grounding on building this, fortifying this foundation that then can really, it can be quite magical in your journey in this reality if you sort of set in to something. It doesn't matter what it is. I
Right.
would just say that just find the thing that resonates with you. What
With
do you?
you. Yeah, exactly. Because, we all we all have different, we all come in here as different people, and that's part of the underlying creativity of consciousness. And when people start saying, well, there's only, my way is the right way, and this is the way it's supposed to be, and I'm always right. Well, that squashes creativity, basically, And what you were saying about like being very specific sometimes about your magic. But I also expect that, an artist can be, very detailed when they're, when they're doing a painting, and every single brushstroke means something. And then maybe they turn around and the brush hits the canvas in a way that they didn't expect. And then they get to look at it and go, well, maybe that was something that, that actually might work pretty well, And then you have Jackson Pollock, but, just throwing paint at the canvas. But
for all those people that don't know who he is, which for some reason history seems to be wiped off the face of the earth in so many different ways, right down to, you can't even believe it unless, I have 6 children, so I know it. It's like, but I homeschool them, so they still have a sense of history. They still have, they have an idea of what a book looks like because I hand it to them. I make them read it. You know what I mean? So there's this sort of like lost art. It's like an art form, really. It's like it's a lost craft, like the craft that we're sharing with the world, and we're teaching people how to create. That's almost being lost as we speak. Yeah. And it's coming in that form of like the dissolving and this sort of like merging of this transhumanistic sort of like idea, which is kind of a little problematic in my opinion. Just that on the forefront as a, hey, don't worry about your consciousness. Use this chip and it will give you everything that you need because you're not powerful. You're just a nobody. Because it's like a programming to remove you from the equation. Humans are sort of they're nothing. Don't worry about them. Just move them off the table. It's a little concerning in my opinion. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we as humans need to step into our power as humans to create. And it may be that we can create things like AI, and certainly it's useful if, someone says, well, Jackson Pollock, and you don't know who Jackson Pollock is, Google is your friend. And you'll learn all kinds of things about Jackson Pollock, and you'll be able to see some of his paintings, and that's pretty wonderful. And the fact that, AI can probably sort through a lot of data a lot faster than our brains can, but we created that, we created AI, and then create medicines that maybe that may become very useful. But if we put ourselves below the mechanistic so-called intelligence, and I'm one of those who I do not believe that AI can become sentient or ever will. It's just, that's an episode all of its own, podcast episode all of its own. But I think it's important for us to understand that what creates the universe is not a chip. What creates the universe is consciousness, or the Tao, or one of many words that can be used to come to an understanding that physical reality is not all there is, and that we have extraordinary power in physical reality that we have walked away from, that we have rejected in many ways. And because we have we believe that physical reality is all there is. And I think until we learn to step into our power as humans and as the spirits that we are, we're going to keep running into all kind of problems. Now, interestingly, astrologically, the planet Pluto is a planet that has a lot to do with power, with intrinsic power. And Pluto just moved into the sign of Aquarius, which is kind of a very revolutionary sign, but it's also kind of a very scientific sign. So I expect that we're going to be grappling with this concept of, chips in our brain and AI, and there will be technological breakthroughs, technological breakdowns, and huge grappling with the moral and psychological ramifications of the technology that we are creating. Now, I probably won't be around for it, but when Pluto moves into Pisces in 2044, that's when we're going to start coming to understand, I believe, the underlying reality of consciousness that creates reality. And while we've been playing around with technology, now all of a sudden we're going to understand how we, with our emotions and our minds and our hearts, actually create reality. Not, as I said, like, clutch the crystals, wave the magic wand, and the red Mercedes appears in your driveway. The creation of physical reality is the creation of consciousness, of all consciousness, all of the different consciousnesses that are part of this earth. And consciousness is in every atom and molecule. So it's not like, which, doesn't mean that we can't, manifest what we want in our lives. But I think that there's going to be a major change in the human understanding of reality and our ability to create a reality that works for everyone, and that maybe starts overcoming the problems of cruelty and violence that our race has been dealing with for so long. And, I'm sure that sounds very idealistic in some ways. And you think that all of a sudden we're going to solve the problems that have been plaguing us for millennia? Maybe. Maybe this is the time. Either that or we're going to destroy ourselves.
I mean, I think it came from some potential passing prophet. I have a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Just that in of itself, we know who that came from. But
I do.
And so just that in of itself is enough to conjure up a spark that will alter the very reality and the fabric of that right now. And so I absolutely support and agree with what you're saying 100%. It's not an idealistic sort of like viewpoint. It is reality because have you heard of the Schumann resonance?
Yes.
Right. So I had a dear friend of the channel on recently, Alexis from Ascension Diaries, and she delves deep into these readings. That's what she does for sort of transmitting. Now, within my stratosphere, I channel Latsu. Latsu sort of gives me direct information. People sort of like, they always at the beginning of the year, they're like, okay, what's going on? Is it going to be really bad? Everyone's telling me there's death and destruction, brimstone and fire falling out of the sky. And literally, I'm not kidding you, this is his answer. Imagine you are a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be realized. And I'm like, wow. Truly, I can't I'm observing this coming out of my mouth going, wow. If And if anyone ever knew that I have no idea what I'm saying, I am nothing. It just comes out, and I'm like, wow. And so the truth is, he has this sort of like he speaks on very much a messaging very much like yours. When you look deeper as an astrologist, you look into the deeper meaning of things through the planets. The basic understanding is we're going to receive a frequency from the sun 9 times more powerful than in human history this year. Now, he said that back in January. Now, it's sort of rolled out a bit this way. And then she starts looking at it and going, look, the resonance of the Earth is normally 7.83 hertz, which would align with the replication of what is above is below, what's in is outside, all is one, one is all. Understand it's not a concept for you and I. We understand it, we embody it, we live it. The universe is inside us, we are the universe is us, this stuff. So then she says, okay, 7.83 on a brainwave perspective is right in line with a sort of a theta brainwave. You know, you're getting down there, theta, alpha. And so this is the Earth's resonance. This is what's coming from the Earth, right? I'm seeing a prediction for the next year and a half of a hertz frequency going up to 40, 50, 60 hertz, which
really?
Wow. Gamma, right? So gamma is complete consciousness. And so this is like, oh, well, this, and so in evidence, he's saying only happy days are here again. This is his, he wants to get, why don't you start realizing everything is all as one thing? He's going, happy, only good things. This is only going to get better. And a lot of people like brimstone and fire. And it just reinforced. I love these epiphanies where she gives me this information, which then reinforces what he already shared with me. He knows to be true. But, you know, this is what we do when we're dealing with the spirit world. We want to validate it again and again and again. And so from her own admission, from all her data, it's getting higher and it's going to be good, not fear, death and destruction, financial ruin, the apocalypse and all this kind of stuff. Now, is it, you know, being in the real world as you refer to it and we refer to it, this reality on paper, there's no question the financial system doesn't exist. It's on vapor. That's just right there in front of us. We cannot be delusional about that. And there's certainly an infrastructure where people are propping up the very fabric of our financial institutions right now due to the construct of how things are. So I'm not delusional. We see this, but I also 1000% embody what you're saying, and that resonance and that true understanding that higher resonance will always dilute, dissolve, disintegrate this lower watt stuff that is evident. And I will live and breathe and die by that in this natural born life. And I have evidence through my very experiences that validate that knowing that I have. So I would say that I am 100% just agreeing with you on everything you said, because it really does. It's not, it's really, you know, if things were this bad and it was going to be an end of all ends, we would never have that interception several years ago with the political landscape that gave us an identification of what's going on. And so we're looking around going, hang on, we would have been sheep to the slaughter, but now we're kind of like, hang on a second, what's going on here? And everyone's like being able to go, there's some ominous sort of like rippling effects of some messaging that's going out there. And it's almost in plain sight. Like there's no like delusion anymore. We're witnessing it with our own eyes. There's some sort of like gathering, an attempt of control that is no longer in the background. It's present.
And the thing is, it's working to some degree. I mean, there is a whole hell of a lot of delusion going on out there. You know, RFK is going to rise up from the dead and become Trump's vice president. There are people who believe this shit, you know? So, I mean, the level of delusion out there is extreme. The level of serious mental illness is becoming problematic.
Well, would you say that is problematic, but it's also by design? Like there is a design, there's a crafting that's creating this delusion that's coming from the very way that the so-called puppet masters are creating the infrastructure that
Yeah.
puts people in this position. Like right down to, in my opinion, my observation is where people are starting to find that they should just stay in their one lane and go, you know what? I don't need to reproduce anymore. That's a bad idea. Why? Why
Yeah.
is it? Where are you getting these concepts from? And it's becoming a pretty big deal. And I think that that is problematic in relation to populating the earth, that we need people to reproduce. So I don't know how that's supposed to materialize, but I think that it should be put into the mix, an idea that that's a good idea. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there are definitely issues with the environment that are going to be highly problematic. And I think that we are going to find ways of, I think there's going to be, a lot of death and destruction coming up, quite honestly. I do. Whether, if we get through that, I mean, this is what I see coming, that there's a lot of upheaval, a fair amount of death and destruction. I mean, we're seeing it every day right now. I mean, we just don't, we happen to live in America. We don't live in Gaza. We don't live in Ukraine, and the fact of the matter is that I think people are going to reproduce, whether they, people are going to reproduce because people are going to have sex, but and people want to reproduce. I mean, that's kind of an inborn thing, is it for a lot of people,
Yeah,
that they want to, they want to leave something of themselves when they move on. But I also think that we are at a critical point in human development, and we are at a fork in the road. And I don't think that there is going to be necessarily an easy way out for the world in general. For some people, there will be. But there's also the fact that we have, I mean, reproducing means bringing more souls into physical reality. But the problem, too, is that we're also damned afraid of death. And death is, it's not a question of death. We're all going to die. It's a question of being afraid of death, and also a question of how we meet our death. I mean, people torture each other. It's appalling that, the things that go on in this world. And I don't think that I mean, I hope I'm wrong. And actually, there's an astrologer, guy by the name of Andre Barbeau, who felt that in 2026, there are planetary patterns that indicate a whole new reset for human civilization. And I hope he's right. And I think he probably is. But, it's like we rarely have change without, at least in my understanding of history, we rarely have breakthrough types of change without a certain amount of death and destruction. And I am, I wish that we could figure out a way to do this in a way that is more aware, that is more, what's the word I'm looking for? Where we don't constantly hurt each other. Death is not the problem. Destruction is not the problem. Things have to be destroyed for new things to be built. What the problem is cruelty. The problem is lack of empathy. The problem is trying to control other people instead of letting them live their lives. So I think I don't think that people reproducing is going to be a problem unless, of course, we have some major disaster that, leads to sterilization of half the human race or something like that. But
don't you think you see that, like the problematic effects of the way that things are being presented within society? And I just had someone on the channel, and we were talking about this programming and sort of having, integrating within, a child's development ideas of how they should perceive reality. It can be problematic. So, if you're integrating into a Disney landscape, certain types of relationships that do not lead to reproduction can be problematic. It should be something that someone comes to that conclusion when they're of a developed mind, that they can make that decision of what's their expression of sexuality, what's their expression of themselves. But when you're peppering it into a developing a timeline of a child, I have a problem with that. It's like, once you're in a place where you've developed and you have a better understanding of what it is that you like or dislike, or your worldview of reality, however it is, then you make those decisions. But I feel like there's an underlying tone where they're attempting to manipulate the future of the world by creating this suggestibility at such a young age. Does that make sense?
I think that the problem is not reproduction. It's the problem of who reproduces and how we educate the children. Because dear God, children are a commodity at this point. For a lot of people, children are actually a commodity. Children are ignored, children are sold, children are abused, and that's a problem. And I think that if you can bring a child into the world and give them a life that is worth living, because you teach them how to manage and create within physical reality, that's one thing. But and I also think too that people come in with I see what you're saying about this background sense of we are overpopulated and we also have to stop having children. I think that is something that, I don't know. There are a lot of people in this world, and the world is, a finite place. There's a finite number of people that the world can handle without the ecosystem, which literally keeps us alive, falling apart. But there are also, I do not have children. I came into this life, I knew I didn't want to have children. I had other things I wanted to do with my life. And I have, people said, oh, you'll regret it. I don't. I've never regretted it. I have a friend who, she wanted a child, and she waited until later because she just, it just didn't happen for her. And now she's got the child that she wanted, and she is just happy as can be as a mother. But on the other hand, I actually have past life memories. One of them being 16th century London, where I was responsible for 10 children. And we were very, very poor, and just trying to keep them fed was an issue. And there were other lifetimes in which I was a parent. And so I have experienced parental realities, and this is not that lifetime for me. So I think it's a very individual choice. And I think that a lot of people are not having children because they look around them. And I don't think it's just people saying, well, we're overpopulated. But I think that there's this sense of, my God, look at what's happening to the world. Look at how we kill each other. Look at how we torture each other. Look at how we bomb each other. Look at how Putin is threatening nuclear destruction. Look at how we have all of this we've already dealt with a great deal of nuclear destruction. Do I want to bring a child into this world? I think that's a reasonable way of thinking of it. But then again, if you feel like you want to have a child or you want to have children, and you are a conscious being who is concerned about the future of the world, then perhaps the child that you bring in is one of the ones who will help turn it all around. And so saying, well, I can't have more than two children because that's what the powers that be say is, you can only replace yourself. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that that's an individual choice. But then again, there are a lot of people who get pregnant, don't want to have children, can't have an abortion, have the child, torture it, sell it, whatever, or just ignore it, or just kick it out on the street. Um, and it's not. I don't think it's something that can be legislated. And I don't think it's something that can be judged. Um, if you want to judge having children, I don't think you can judge having children. If you want to judge having children and abusing them, that's something else. I'm going to judge you, But yeah, it's a tough world. It's a tough decision to bring a child into the world, and I think it should be a decision that's made consciously and not something accidental that you don't, so that you end up with a lot of unwanted children.
Well, I'm a father of 6, so I'm definitely about the children.
But you're a committed father of 6, I bet.
Oh, I homeschool all my kids. My wife and I homeschool because I'm going to be the ambassador of their very mindset and help them craft their reality without an overlaying sort of like interruption of external forces that give them a different perception of reality that is problematic. So, you want to be, you want them to, there are 5 of them know how to hypnotize people, cast magic, remote viewing, all this kind of. This is so important, in my opinion. This is critical.
Crucial. It's crucial. And our education is so important. And I mean, ever since, the 90s, I think or maybe it was the early aughts with Bush, the way that we educate our children in this country, and really all over, sometimes we don't even educate them. We can't have a country where we can't have a democracy with an uneducated civilization isn't the word I'm looking for. Uneducated. Sorry. The word is flying out of my head. With an uneducated population. And really, that's what we have right now. We have, people who are who actually believe that, that RFK is going to be, to use one of my favorite examples, RFK is going to be rise from the death, so he can rise from the dead, so he can become Trump's vice president, or the space brethren are going to come down and wave their magic wands, and because their magic wands are more powerful than our magic wands, then all of our problems will be solved. Which is not to say that I don't believe in alien life, but this whole concept of we need a savior is problematic, I think, because we are our saviors. But if we are going to save ourselves, we have to educate our children well, and carefully in ways that will allow them to change the world.
Yeah. Oh, amen to that. I mean, it's just about making them aware of how powerful they are as an individual, as a collective, and ultimately part of the singular. That true understanding of that is when profound things take place. Now, if you just train to be a muppet or a monkey in a grinder, which a lot of systems generally do, they're not in training the masses for this awakening revolution of consciousness. They want you to be a robot.
Right.
And So then that becomes problematic with the mindset. And so the power.
That gets back to control. That gets back to the need for control. And I think that we're going to be horrified when we learn to the extent to which we are being controlled.
I think
if we ever do,
I think it's happening right now.
Yeah. And so and I think that's another thing. When I was talking about Pluto going through Aquarius, I think that the attempts to control our minds will be revealed. And some of us will go, well, yeah, I'd rather have somebody else in charge of everything. Just make sure I've got, Netflix and beer and food in the refrigerator and
weed or whatever it is.
Right. Just make sure everything's good for me, and you can rule the world. That's fine with me. But that's not going to work in the world that's coming. And that's why I think that there is going to be a certain amount. I don't think the world's going to end, but I think there will be very difficult situations and actual destruction. So we need to make the most of that and make sure that it's easier to shift and change things when things are like up in the air. Okay. For instance, in the tarot, you probably know something about the tarot, right? There's a tower card, the lightning struck tower, and the tower is struck by lightning and it crumbles. Well, when the tower is struck by lightning and it crumbles, you're left with a pile of stones. And that means you can build a longhouse instead of a tower, And then, of course, the card after the tower is the star, which is the card of an illumination and understanding of the world and connection with the world. And it's a very hopeful card. So I do think we're going through what my friend Byron Ballard calls, and has for a while, tower time. And I think we're in the middle of that right now. But I also think that that on the other side, we can see what has caused the problems, what has caused the destruction, the concept of control of our lives and our minds, and how problematic that is. And I do believe that we can build a civilization that is empathetic and caring and works for everyone, and where everyone has a chance to fulfill their potentials and create in because I really do think that the world is the physical realm is really about creating something new and different. And I think we can do that. I do.
I think we are resonating with so many things today on this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
This has been an incredible insight into foundational constructs that are necessary to be a practitioner in the areas that we're speaking of today. And more so, I think the most important thing is getting a real sense of know who you are, know where you're going, and have a deeper exploration of that.
Yeah.
And that will be obviously for the individual.
Yes.
And as we resonate more, I would just say in closing that the resonance is critical to your exploration and then validation of all things. And that can come with, listening and hearing something and reading something that is you are embodied and you're gravitated to. And then that's where it can start and end for everyone. And if you just take that away, a take away from all the incredible insight that we've had today, then I believe that we effectively have altered someone's consciousness with just that concept. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I hope so. It's certainly been a pleasure speaking with you.
It really, really has. I'm very grateful to have you as a new friend. And I think this is just the beginning of a fantastic, amazing relationship. And I want to say, in closing, I'm going to put all your social media under this podcast. places where to find you,
Mm-hmm.
a website or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But before we leave, I want to ask you one last question. What is your definition of consciousness?
Reality, the ultimate reality. I mean, and I'm not sure if it's even definable as anything but the ultimate reality. So
I love that. I love it. I love it because, some people, because everyone has their own perception. It's like I've never heard the same answer. I think every answer is beautiful. Some people get really tongue twisted and they just freeze and go, "Oh, I'm not sure. Hang on," and that's okay too. But you know who you are, my friend, and I'm very grateful for that.
I'm grateful to have met you and learned about your podcast, and I'm sure we'll be connecting again in the future.
With that, I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.